Exodus Chapter Summaries, 1-40. Published by BibleVise. Immerse yourself in the epic story of liberation and covenant found in the book of Exodus. These Exodus chapter summaries guide you through the Israelites' journey from slavery in Egypt to the Promised Land, highlighting key moments like the 10 plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, and the receiving of the 10 Commandments. When you are done reading here, you may also want to check out our complete list of Bible chapter summaries for every book of the Bible. Book of Exodus Summary by Chapter. Chapter 1. Oppression and Multiplication. The Israelites, descendants of Jacob, have grown numerous and powerful in Egypt. A new Pharaoh arises who, fearing their strength, enslaves them, forcing harsh labor upon them. He brutally decrees that all newborn Israelite sons must be killed to control their population. Despite the oppression, the Israelites continue to multiply. This chapter sets the stage for the rest of the book of Exodus by introducing the plight of the Israelites and laying the foundation for the coming of a deliverer. Chapter 2. Birth and Early Life of Moses. An Israelite woman from the tribe of Levi gives birth to a son and hides him for 3 months to protect him. When she can no longer do so, she places him in a basket waterproofed with tar and pitch and sets it adrift in the Nile River. Pharaoh's daughter discovers the baby, adopts him, and names him Moses. He is raised in the Egyptian palace, aware of his Hebrew heritage. As an adult, Moses witnesses an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Angered, he kills the Egyptian and hides his body. His actions highlight his compassion for his oppressed people, foreshadowing his future role in their liberation. Chapter 3. God calls Moses from the burning bush. Years later, while tending his father-in-law's flock, Moses encounters God in the form of a burning bush that is not consumed. God speaks to Moses, revealing his holy name as Yahweh, usually translated as I Am, and commissioning him to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses, overwhelmed by the task and feeling inadequate, expresses doubts and hesitations. God assures Moses of his presence and provides miraculous signs to confirm his calling and authority. Chapter 4. Moses returns to Egypt. Despite God's reassurances, Moses remains hesitant. God empowers him with signs and allows him to take his brother Aaron to be his spokesperson. Moses returns to Egypt with his wife and sons and reunites with Aaron. Together, they gather the Israelite elders and present their mission from God. The elders believe God has heard their cries and will deliver them, but their hopes are soon dashed as Pharaoh reacts to the request for freedom with harsher labor and brutal punishment. Chapter 5. Moses confronts Pharaoh. Moses and Aaron approach Pharaoh, requesting a 3-day journey into the wilderness to worship God. Pharaoh arrogantly refuses, questioning the authority of this God, and increases the burdens upon the Israelites. The Israelites' morale plummets, and they accuse Moses and Aaron of worsening their situation. Moses, feeling discouraged, questions God's purpose, but God reaffirms his promise to deliver the Israelites and bring judgment upon Egypt. Chapter 6. God reaffirms the covenant and provides Moses' lineage. Moses returns to the discouraged Israelites, but they cannot comprehend deliverance in the midst of their growing misery. God speaks to Moses, reaffirming the covenant he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob regarding the land of Canaan. God assures Moses that he will not only deliver his people but also bring them into the Promised Land. This chapter also offers genealogical information concerning Moses and Aaron, tracing their lineage back to Levi as a way to further solidify the legitimacy of their authority. Chapter 7. The plagues begin, blood and frogs. God equips Moses and Aaron with power to perform miraculous signs to convince Pharaoh to release the Israelites. The first plague transforms the Nile River into blood, rendering it undrinkable and unusable. This act disrupts the lifeblood of Egypt, both literally and symbolically, as the Nile is central to their society. However, Pharaoh remains stubborn, attributing the event to magic and calling upon his own magicians to replicate the feat. This chapter establishes the pattern of the plagues, God's intervention through Moses and Aaron versus Pharaoh's resistance and defiance. Chapter 8. Plagues continue, lice, flies, and pestilence on livestock. Despite the devastation of the first plague, Pharaoh refuses to relent. God unleashes a second plague, a swarm of lice that afflict both humans and animals. Again, Pharaoh's magicians attempt to replicate the phenomenon but fail. The third plague brings forth swarms of flies that cover the land. This time, even Pharaoh's officials acknowledge the work of a divine hand and urge him to let the Israelites go. However, Pharaoh remains hardened and refuses. A fourth plague strikes, bringing a devastating disease upon Egyptian livestock, further crippling their economy and highlighting the power of the God of the Israelites. Chapter 9. Plagues intensify: boils, locusts, and darkness. The fifth plague brings painful boils upon humans and animals, further demonstrating God's power over all living things. Pharaoh's advisors now openly advocate for releasing the Israelites, recognizing the divine origin of the plagues. Yet, Pharaoh's heart remains hardened. The sixth plague brings forth a massive locust swarm that devours all vegetation, leaving the land barren and desolate. This plague demonstrates the fragility of life and Pharaoh's inability to protect his people. The seventh plague plunges all of Egypt into thick darkness for 3 days, while the Israelites experience light in their dwellings. This display of contrasting conditions underscores the distinction between those who follow God and those who do not. Chapter 10. The final confrontation: the plague of death and the Passover. Seeing the extent of the suffering, Pharaoh pleads with Moses to end the plagues but insists on retaining some form of Israelite servitude. God instructs Moses to announce the final, devastating plague: the death of all firstborn sons, both human and animal, throughout Egypt. The Israelites are instructed to observe the Passover ritual, sacrificing a lamb and marking their doorposts with its blood. The angel of death passes over the homes marked with blood, sparing the firstborn sons of the Israelites. This plague finally breaks Pharaoh's resistance. He concedes to Moses' demand and allows the Israelites to leave Egypt, sending them out with urgings for blessings. However, his heart remains hardened. Chapter 11. Departure from Egypt and spoils from the Egyptians. The Israelites, finally authorized to leave their bondage, gather hastily. They take with them not just their belongings but also spoils of the Egyptians, items borrowed or taken as compensation for their years of forced labor. This act foreshadows God's judgment against the Egyptians and his provision for his chosen people. Before their departure, God reiterates the importance of remembering the Passover ritual and establishes it as an everlasting ordinance, reminding future generations of their deliverance from Egypt. This chapter marks the turning point from their suffering to their journey toward freedom and covenant with God. Chapter 12. Instructions for the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This chapter offers detailed instructions for the ongoing observance of the Passover feast. It emphasizes the symbolic elements of the ritual, including the sacrificial lamb, the bitter herbs, and the unleavened bread. Each element serves as a reminder of their past suffering, their hasty escape, and the need for continued vigilance against sin. The chapter also establishes the Feast of Unleavened Bread, a 7-day celebration following Passover. This annual observance reinforces the significance of their exodus from Egypt and their dependence on God for sustenance. Chapter 13. The firstborn are consecrated and the Red Sea crossing. God instructs Moses to dedicate all firstborn males, both human and animal, to him as a symbol of redemption and recognition of his power over the Egyptians. This further emphasizes the stark contrast between the judgments against Egypt and the deliverance of the Israelites. The Israelites travel from Ramses to the Red Sea, where they seem trapped between the approaching Egyptian army and the vast body of water. Pharaoh, regretting his decision to let them go, pursues them with his chariots and warriors. Facing imminent defeat, the Israelites cry out to God in fear. God instructs Moses to stretch his staff over the sea, and miraculously, the waters part, creating a dry path for the Israelites to cross. Chapter 14. The Song of the Sea and the Destruction of Pharaoh's Army. The Israelites walk safely through the parted sea, while the pursuing Egyptian army is swallowed by the returning waters. This act of miraculous deliverance strengthens the faith of the Israelites and showcases God's ultimate power and judgment over his enemies. Witnessing the Pharaoh and his army's demise from the other side, Moses and the Israelites burst into a song of praise and thanksgiving to God for their deliverance. This chapter celebrates God's victory and solidifies his covenant with the Israelites. Chapter 15. Arrival at Marah and provision in the wilderness. Having crossed the Red Sea, the Israelites arrive at Marah, but they find the water there bitter and undrinkable. They grumble against Moses, questioning his leadership and their decision to leave Egypt. God instructs Moses to cast a specific piece of wood into the water, and the water becomes sweet. This act demonstrates God's continued provision for his people and his ability to meet their needs even in the harsh wilderness. Chapter 16. Manna from heaven and quail. The Israelites continue their journey, facing hunger once again. This time, they openly complain and express doubt in God's ability to care for them. God responds by providing miraculous provision. Manna, a flaky food, appears on the ground each morning, and in the evening, quails land in their camp. This chapter highlights the ongoing tension between God's faithfulness and the Israelites' wavering faith. It also foreshadows the continued need for God's miraculous intervention to sustain them on their journey to the Promised Land. Chapter 17. Water from the rock and the battle with Amalek. The Israelites arrive at Rephidim, where they once again face the challenge of finding water. They complain and accuse Moses of bringing them to the desert to die. God instructs Moses to strike a specific rock with his staff, and water miraculously flows out, quenching the people's thirst. This act mirrors the incident at Marah, reinforcing God's unwavering provision for his people and serving as a reminder of his miraculous power. Additionally, Moses receives support from his commanders, Joshua and Amalek, during a battle against the Amalekites. The Israelites prevail as long as Moses holds his staff aloft, symbolizing the connection between their victory and their dependence on God. Chapter 18. Jethro's visit and delegation of authority. Moses' father-in-law, Jethro, visits him in the desert, witnessing the Israelites' journey and their relationship with God. Jethro advises Moses to delegate his leadership responsibilities by appointing capable individuals to handle different levels of disputes and legal matters. This advice recognizes the growing size and complexity of the Israelite community and foreshadows the establishment of a more structured system of governance. Chapter 19. Arrival at Mount Sinai and preparation for God's presence. The Israelites reach Mount Sinai, the place where God will reveal himself and establish the covenant with them. God instructs them to prepare themselves for his presence, including washing their garments, abstaining from sexual relations, and maintaining a set distance from the mountain. This preparation emphasizes the holiness of God and the importance of purity and reverence in approaching him. Chapter 20. The Ten Commandments. Amid thunder, lightning, and smoke, God delivers the Ten Commandments directly to the Israelites. These commandments, the foundation of the covenant relationship between God and his people, outline basic moral and ethical principles that guide their behavior towards God and one another. This chapter marks a pivotal moment in the Israelites' journey, marking their acceptance of God's authority and their commitment to live in accordance with his laws. Chapter 21. The Book of the Covenant, Laws and Regulations. Following the Ten Commandments, God provides Moses with a comprehensive set of laws and regulations on various matters, including social justice, personal conduct, worship practices, and sacrificial offerings. These laws aim to establish order, promote justice, and guide the Israelites' behavior as they journey towards and eventually dwell in the Promised Land. Chapter 22. Further laws and the renewal of the covenant. This chapter continues the presentation of laws and regulations, addressing issues like responsibilities towards slaves and animals, property rights, and various offenses. The people readily agree to obey these laws, reaffirming their commitment to the covenant. Following the presentation of the laws, Moses builds an altar and sacrifices animals as a covenant meal. Half of the blood is sprinkled on the altar, symbolizing God's side of the covenant, and the other half is sprinkled on the people, signifying their acceptance of their responsibilities under the covenant. Chapter 23. Laws regarding justice and social responsibility. Further laws are provided, emphasizing fairness and compassion in legal proceedings, social interactions, and treatment of foreigners and the vulnerable. These laws aim to establish a just and ethical society that reflects God's character and provides a foundation for their future life in the Promised Land. Chapter 24. Moses receives instructions and the golden calf. Moses ascends Mount Sinai to receive further instructions from God. He remains there for 40 days and 40 nights, leaving Aaron and the elders in charge of the people. However, the Israelites, impatient and missing Moses' leadership, pressure Aaron to create an idol, a golden calf, to worship. This act of idol worship demonstrates the Israelites' wavering faith and their susceptibility to the temptation to turn away from their covenant with God. Chapter 25. Instructions for the tabernacle and its furnishings. While Moses is on Mount Sinai, God provides detailed instructions for building the tabernacle, a portable sanctuary that will serve as the central place of worship for the Israelites during their wanderings in the wilderness. The design and construction of the tabernacle, its furnishings, and the priestly garments symbolize God's presence dwelling among them and the specific ways He desires to be worshipped. Chapter 26. The dwelling place, Mishkan. This chapter focuses specifically on the construction details of the Mishkan, the dwelling place of God within the tabernacle. It describes the various components, including the outer coverings, framework, and inner curtains, outlining the specific materials and methods to be used. Chapter 27. The altar of burnt offering and the courtyard. This chapter details the construction of the altar of burnt offering, where animal sacrifices will be offered to God. It also describes the construction of the courtyard surrounding the tabernacle, which will serve as a designated space for specific rituals and gatherings. Chapter 28. Priestly garments and consecration. God provides instructions for the design and construction of special garments to be worn by the priests who will minister in the tabernacle. These garments symbolize their unique role as intermediaries between God and His people. The chapter also outlines the elaborate procedures for consecrating Aaron and his sons as priests, signifying their official separation and dedication to this sacred service. Chapter 29. Consecration of the tabernacle and the altar. The chapter describes the specific rituals and offerings required for consecrating the tabernacle and the altar of burnt offering. This process signifies the official dedication of the sanctuary and establishes the proper ways to approach God through sacrifice and worship. Chapter 30. The altar of incense and the laver for washing. This chapter details the construction of the altar of incense, where fragrant offerings will be presented to God daily. It also describes the construction of the laver, a bronze basin for washing, which symbolizes the ongoing need for the priests to maintain their ceremonial purity before serving in the tabernacle. Chapter 31. Bezalel and Oholiab appointed for tabernacle work. God identifies two individuals, Bezalel and Oholiab, as being filled with the Spirit of God and possessing exceptional skills to oversee the construction of the tabernacle and its furnishings. This selection signifies the importance of craftsmanship and God's involvement in the creation of these sacred objects. Chapter 32. The golden calf continued in Moses' anger. While Moses remains on Mount Sinai, the Israelites return to worshiping the golden calf. When Moses descends and witnesses this blatant idolatry, he becomes enraged and destroys the calf, scattering its gold dust onto the water and making the Israelites drink it. He confronts Aaron, who offers weak excuses for participating in the idolatry. Chapter 33. Intercession and renewal of the covenant. Moses intercedes for the Israelites, pleading with God to forgive their sin. God expresses His anger and declares punishments, but also reaffirms His commitment to His people. Moses continues to persuade God to show compassion, and God agrees to relent from complete destruction. However, the relationship is fractured. God's presence no longer dwells directly in the midst of the camp but remains present in a pillar of cloud that moves ahead of them. Moses pitches a tent called the Tent of Meeting outside the camp, where he can commune with God face to face. Chapter 34. Renewal of the covenant and the second tablets. God instructs Moses to carve new stone tablets to replace the ones he broke in his anger. He reaffirms the Ten Commandments and reveals additional aspects of his character, emphasizing his love, mercy, and righteousness. Moses ascends the mountain again, receiving the new tablets and spending 40 days and 40 nights in God's presence. His face becomes radiant, reflecting the glory of God he has encountered. Chapter 35, Offerings for the Tabernacle Construction. The Israelites, motivated by a renewed sense of commitment after witnessing Moses' encounter with God, generously contribute materials and skills for the construction of the tabernacle. This display of unity and devotion signifies their renewed commitment to the covenant and the importance of the tabernacle as a central place of worship. Chapter 36, The Construction of the Tabernacle begins. The chapter details the construction process of the tabernacle, following the specific instructions God provided to Moses. This section highlights the expertise of the appointed craftsmen and the meticulous attention to detail required for the construction of this sacred space. Chapter 37, The Ark of the Covenant and the Table for the Bread of Presence. This chapter focuses on the construction of two specific elements within the tabernacle: the Ark of the Covenant, a sacred chest that will hold the Ten Commandments, and the table for the bread of presence, where loaves of bread will be displayed as a continual offering to God. Chapter 38, The Completion of the Tabernacle and the Setting Up. The chapter describes the completion of the remaining elements of the tabernacle and the courtyard, including the hangings, curtains, and furnishings. Finally, the tabernacle is erected and set up in the wilderness, ready for its dedication and official use. Chapter 39, The Completion of the Priestly Garments. This chapter details the completion of the special garments for the priests, ensuring they have everything needed for their official roles in the tabernacle. Chapter 40, The tabernacle is dedicated and the cloud covers it. The chapter culminates in the dedication of the tabernacle. Moses inspects the completed work and confirms that everything has been done according to God's instructions. Finally, the cloud of God's presence descends and fills the tabernacle, signifying his acceptance and dwelling place among his people. As the book of Exodus concludes, the central theme of God's deliverance and covenant with the Israelites takes center stage. The final chapters highlight the significance of the tabernacle as a symbol of God's presence and the ongoing journey of the Israelites toward the promised land. The final verses of Exodus summarize additional instructions Moses receives from God concerning the order of the tabernacle components during travel, the use of the cloud as a guide for their movements, and the continual presence of God with the Israelites.